Hey everyone, and welcome to a special guide that we made in collaboration with our friends from Riot Games Latin America. We've made a bunch of these throughout the year, so if you speak Spanish, check them out. Today, we're going to be teaching you how to apply high-level vision control techniques, which will be support focused, but of course, everyone can place wards, so keep watching even if you never play this role to up your vision game. This may not blow you away with uncontrollable excitement, but vision control is one of the most powerful and underrated ways to carry your team. Being on top of your vision game will help your entire team succeed in every lane by getting caught less, catching your opponent more, and securing objectives. While vision control is a team-based effort, as a support you hold the majority of your team's vision power in your hands. After this guide, you'll be equipped with challenger knowledge to illuminate the map during the early game and climb ranked faster. This time we'll be analyzing gameplay from AK Newbie. And we quickly want to mention that you should definitely stick around until the end of this guide. We are super confident that we have some crazy ward tricks that you do not know about and can win you games. Alright, enough hype, let's get into it. When it comes to vision control, there's no consistent timings or placements that will always net you results. While we will give you a couple of guidelines in this guide, vision control is dynamic and you should always be asking yourself one thing when it comes to vision. What is the highest value I can get from my ward and how can I get it safely? During our research, we see time and time again support players would put a ward out randomly on autopilot in Diamond Elo and below. If players push up past the halfway point, they'll probably put down a ward without actually thinking about if they need to, not only wasting valuable wards, but also putting them in the wrong place. As we jump into a replay from Newbie, he's up against a Graves jungle. He leashes for his jungler and arrives to lane at the same time as his opponents. Then at 236, he wards. Why do you think he wards at this time? So he wards now because he's thinking about who the enemy jungler is and where they started. For Graves, a typical jungle path for him to do is red into Krugs into Raptors. At around 230, that's how long it would take to kill the Krugs, so from this point on, there is a chance that Graves could come for a gank, especially since they're pushing. Why do you think he put the ward here instead of the try or side brush? Well, because it's Graves. Newbie considered where Graves could actually gank from should he decide to gank before pathing topside. Graves has a dash, so he could go through the dragon pit to evade vision. For this reason, placing the ward here will spot Graves regardless of which way he may path. If it was a Twitch jungle, you would want to place your ward at 120 before getting into lane, in the try brush to scout out a level 2 gank after red buff before he enters stealth. As you can see, vision control is a dynamic concept and it depends on what you're facing to determine where you will place your wards. There are two general guidelines that we can give you though, which will immediately up your vision game. The first is to use this ward placement and do it early if the jungler is starting bot side between 1 minute 30 and 2 minutes 30. It's actually our favorite placement for the first ward in most cases because it covers both entrances to your lane. If you are red side and were to place this ward in a try brush, you would spot the enemy jungler maybe 1 to 2 seconds faster, but have no vision of the river, which is usually not a trade-off worth making. The second guideline is to place your second ward based on the timing of jungle camp respawns. Jungle camps spawn every 2 minutes and 30 seconds, so the first camp a jungler clears after their buff will respawn between 4 minutes 20 and 4 minutes 40. Red buff starters will usually kill Krugs second, which takes longer than Gromp takes to kill after blue buff. Knowing this, we can get a general idea of when a jungler will return to their starting side of the map on the first respawn of their camps, which will give us a great idea of when to place our second ward to spot the jungler. In this example, Newbie's ADC wards at the 4 minute 30 mark and they're getting pushed in, so this will be enough to scout out Graves if he does try to gank. As we can see, Graves is back on the bot side clearing Raptors. In this game he started red into Raptors into Wolves, but just knowing that Graves started bot side helps Newbie and his team predict that he will be back bot side at this timing despite Graves doing an unpredictable clear. After this point, it will then become too difficult to predict where the jungler will be based on their camp's respawn timings, as the game will start to pick up pace and neutral objectives start to get contested. But now you have two general guidelines to follow for the first two ward timings and placements. let's dive into what can separate you from everyone else: dynamic warding. In this game with newbie on Nami, he's up against a Kayn jungle. Kayn is also a jungler who will power farm from clearing red into Krugs into Raptors, so he knows that Kayn will be back on this side of the map within the next 30 and 40 seconds from now, so he goes for a deep ward near his Krugs to spot him out. This ward is a lot more valuable for newbie's team than the ward that we saw Xayah place against Graves for one key reason. Can you guess what that is? So it's because it has a super high chance of finding Kayn because he's predictably going to come and clear Krugs. If they spot him, great, they know where he is. If they don't spot him with this ward, then that also gives him and his team a ton of information, since he would either be invading or ganking, as this is likely the only camp up right now and also the most valuable. Compare that to these warding spots. These wards will only find Kayn if he passed through the river, which is less likely than him doing Krugs, so it wouldn't really tell the team much if he doesn't show on them. Yes, they help them evade a possible gank, which is valuable, but less likely to get that value than the ward that newbie just placed, since they probably won't reveal Kayn's position as there's a low chance that Kayn ganks this early. This goes back to the point that we made at the start of the guide. Higher value vision can help your entire team, even in the lane phase. However, going for higher value vision can cost you your life. Every single one of you watching this guide right now have died to clearing a control ward or going for deep vision. Some of us more than others, and that's why the buzzword here is dynamic vision. This deep ward on Krugs is nearly always going to be better at this 4-minute 40-second camp timing than a ward in the Tribrush or the river, but is also much harder to get without dying. So knowing if you can get away with it or not is something you need to actually think about every single time to avoid feeding for vision. If he didn't have Aatrox here, he could get engaged on by the Sejuani. Nami dies instantly because she's a squishy champion. He could also run into Kayn and die to the jungler. So without Aatrox, these are the ward options that she would have to settle for instead. Our favourite in this case being below the Tribrush to scout Kayn going for a gank through the wall. Or if he didn't have the wave pushed, he would have to settle for a shallower ward, which would keep them totally safe from ganks if they're not pushing aggressively, since Kayn's early ganks are really weak. To contrast, we're about to see newbie ignore a lot of these safety rules as Pyke. He doesn't have a minion wave shoved into the tower, and he doesn't know where Hecarim is, but walks into the jungle and deep wards. He gets collapsed on and still gets away because he's a super slippery support. This is more of a Pyke thing than anything, but a Bard could pull off a similar play with his portal. Let's quickly acknowledge the thought process that we just went through. We talked about the respawn timing of jungle camps, how the jungler would path for a gank, how squishy Nami is, and minion wave positioning versus jungle threat, all to be considered when placing a single ward. This is why our guide is designed to get you actively thinking about the right things rather than being told exactly what to do, as optimal ward placements will change every single game. Again, keep asking yourself, what is the highest value I can get from my ward and how can I get it safely? Let's now dive further into deep vision. Deep vision against certain junglers is a requirement to stay safe from ganks, whereas shallow lane or Tribrush wards won't actually save you from the gank. For example, if you place your ward here, it will not save you from Hecarim because he's too fast. By the time you see him, it will be too late and you will die to the gank. That's why in the previous example, we saw newbie place a ton of deep wards on Pyke against Hecarim. These wards are great because Hecarim will typically gank straight from doing Krugs or from in the lane. So newbie will have both of those areas spotted out with these two wards. If he only had one ward available, then placing one here would still give vision of both the lane and Krugs, but a lane gank would still be possible as this side of the lane would be in the dark. And if you're against Nocturne, then these wards are also great since he typically moves up in these areas to gank with his ultimate. If you're against Evelynn, then you want to ward her camps since she leaves stealth while in combat, so your traditional wards won't actually spot her coming anyway, but you can see her on the jungle camps. Then wards like this would have a higher chance of spotting out a Zac, and so on. It all comes down to thinking about what you are facing and how to get the most value out of your wards. But how exactly can you get deep vision safely when it's literally a requirement to stay safe from these tricky junglers that we just mentioned? So the two main ways that you can make this happen is to group with your team, so going in with your jungler to place wards, and the other way is to scout out the enemy jungler on the minimap, so if you see them topside, you know it's much safer to go into the jungle and give vision. But you will still need to keep an eye on the side lanes, since you may be treading on wards yourself and they could collapse on you. Now we've talked a lot about dynamic and deep vision, we want to go over some of the cool ward tricks that you can do right away. If you are red side, you'll often find it difficult to get control over this tri-brush. Your opponent may have a control ward here which you cannot contest without dying. This leaves you in the dark and feels like it's risky to try and push without securing that tri-brush. Instead of trying to kill the control ward and dying, there's actually a couple of great spots that you can do which won't get swept and give you all of the vision that you need. By placing two wards, one behind the pit and one below the tri-brush wall, you can get vision of both entry points from the blue side jungle, even if they have control wards set up in these hotspots which are hard to contest. This is great because these wards are unconventional, they are way less likely to get swept while also making your opponent think that they have vision control with the control ward in the tri-brush. So if the enemy mid laner roams and has these control wards, they will think they won't get spotted, and the same for the enemy jungler, allowing you to stay safe while wasting their time. And if you have a ward in the river brush on top of that, perhaps your control ward or your teammate wards there, then you have deep early vision from every single entry point. Another couple of neat tricks that most players don't know about is warding through walls on red side. In this example, we can see Slow land a ward from lane in the side river brush. This allows you to get vision of the brush safely without risking walking into the enemy jungler who may be hiding there. To do this yourself, you'll want to click on the left side of this small rock with your mouse cursor. We recommend practicing it in training tool before getting question mark pinged in ranked by messing it up like this. A much more difficult and lesser known one is to actually ward the red side tri-brush from the river. This allows you to get sweet vision placement to scout out junglers like Nocturne, Zac and Kayn who are likely to initiate a gank from this area. To do this yourself, you'll want to move your champion right up against the wall in this area, and then move your mouse cursor just below the small trees, and just as your cursor turns red, you're most likely in the sweet spot and you can test your ward. This one is really hard to do, and honestly isn't super worth learning since you can often just move into the jungle and get this ward instead. But for style points, it's fun to learn and show off your vision control mastery. This has been a well kept secret where you could previously land a cheese hook from river off this ward, but it would often be just about out of range due to players pathing into lane. However, now that Blitz hook is just that much longer, you can actually hit this hook reliably. All thanks to your stealthy ward shenanigans from the start, that's really unlikely to be spotted by the enemy. And a much more reliable cheese is if you're on red side and you go for a hook like this. Alright, so that brings us to the end of this video. Let us know what you thought about this content type and if you would like to see more vision guides, since there's still a ton of things that we can talk about. Thanks for watching and we'll see you in the next video.